Broadcasting from our studio in Boston, Solutions Review is proud to showcase Red Hat in the Solution Spotlight, an inside look at enterprise technologies.
I'm Doug Atkinson here at Solutions Review, and welcome to the Solution Spotlight featuring Red Hat, and focused on enterprise application platform modernization with commercial Linux. Applications are at the heart of modern enterprises, and organizations must constantly evolve their application strategy to maintain competitive differentiation. For applications to be scalable and highly available, they need an underlying database management system, like Microsoft SQL Server, and a versatile OS environment such as Linux, as an ideal platform for consolidating applications and their respective data management stacks. So today, we're bringing you a presentation by IDC and Red Hat on industry insights and information that will take a more comprehensive look at the different values organizations see by running their Microsoft SQL Server databases on Linux. And to introduce this presentation, we're joined by Nate Lager, Senior Technical Marketing Manager at Red Hat. Nate, thanks for being with us.
Hey Doug, thanks for having me.
Well, I'm glad you're here because there's a lot to cover, and we're going to need your technical expertise at the end after the presentation. But before that, I'd like to get everybody to get a little bit more familiar with you because you've been at Red Hat for almost 5 years now, but you were also on the, I would say on the client side prior to that. I mean, give us a little bit about your journey to the Red Hat side of things.
So today at Red Hat, I'm a technical marketing manager, senior technical marketing manager. I joined that team maybe a little under 2 years ago. Before that, I was a technical account manager, which if you're not familiar with that, basically we help some of our customers, our biggest customers, through some of their worst days, right? It's almost like a kind of like an extra tier of support, right? So I've been in the trenches in that respect. But before that even, I have a very long history, in fact, most of my career in both the support and systems administration roles, right? So I spent about, 15 years in the industry before joining Red Hat.
What we're going to do actually is we're going to let there's a presentation, and again, there's a lot of important information to cover here around the end of life of CentOS, and I want to make sure we get to all that, so we're going to turn it over to Greg at IDC, but then after all that, we're going to come back and you and I are going to have a little bit of a Q&A because I'm sure I'm going to have some questions and we'll even try to incorporate some questions that we've gathered ourselves from folks that might be affected. So with that, right, I'm going to turn it over to Greg for the presentation, and we'll catch up again in probably about a half an hour.
Hi, my name is Greg McAtee, and I'll be joining Nate over Red Hat today. Senior research analyst over at IDC, covering infrastructure software generally, but a specialty in operating systems. Overall, I've been leading coverage for about 4 years. So yeah, really excited to be here and looking forward to introducing our newest paper that we're doing together with you, Nate. So I'd kind of teased our updated white paper, and I'll go into a little bit more depth on that in a minute. But overall, just in terms of what we're going to be covering today from the analyst side, from the IDC side, a couple high-level points. As it relates to this paper, modernizing your, SQL deployments with Red Hat and Red Hat Enterprise Linux. The first, as it relates to this paper, is, application modernization generally is an essential business function for the digital organization, which if implemented properly can give them a competitive edge in their markets. So this is kind of what we're referring to here. It's the, popular buzz term, digital transformation. It all kind of, starts before any of that can happen with the applications that are running themselves and the infrastructure software underneath it. There's our research finds there are a lot of, legacy applications, IT stacks around in order to kind of take that next step forward and go forward with that digital transformation, application modernization, all key things there. Second point, alluded to before, infrastructure software is a key pillar of these application modernization strategies. And that goes all the way down to the operating system. As these businesses undergo application modernization and digital transformation, that's going to begin with a choice of an operating system and choosing the right ones that both meets their current and future needs. Operating systems more specifically, Linux is a preferred operating system choice now and today in 2023 for many global organizations, all over the world. It's become a first-class citizen. It's widely supported by a large network of hardware, software, and services providers. A lot of the vendors that participate in this landscape also, form strategic partnerships. So the one that we're going to be focusing on a little bit more here today in the commercial Linux space is, of course, with Red Hat and Microsoft as well with its SQL Server. For those customers of both Red Hat and Microsoft, ready to undergo this application modernization, there is a great support system from both vendors here for you. And the white paper itself, the last time we'd refreshed this was back in September 2021. It should be out, any day now, if not, already online for all you viewers to, be able to access. So the updated title is the Application Platform Modernization with Enterprise Linux. So really excited for you guys to jump in there. At a high level, when we refer to application modernization, these strategies need to be constantly adjusted and tweaked so businesses can meet their ever-changing needs, objectives for both internal and external stakeholders, customers, in order to really increase that business value. It can take a couple different forms. The first is kind of rehosting, so that's the traditional lift and shift, getting ready those applications, moving them into the cloud. Replatforming, so making small changes to the applications, whether it be the database or the operating system or what have you, or it can go all the way up to re-architecting, so kind of a full rewrite or tear down of that existing application and kind of rebuilding it to totally take advantage of that cloud deployment strategy. A couple of common use cases, examples that we're seeing here. It's as I already referred to, it's the change of operating system, moving from legacy environments to ones that are a bit more forward-looking. Also the virtualization stacks as well. The application development itself, taking those applications and breaking them into microservices and being able to containerize them, have them talk to one another with APIs to streamline and quicken operations there. Could also be deploying new data management systems, for example, relational databases that ingest larger amounts of data for processing and real-time analytics. And of course, all those things are certainly hot topics today with the advent of AI just about everywhere, machine learning. Those are going to be really key to being able to harness that value out of there. And in general, deploying a more secure computing and data layer process as well. So thinking about how IDC views operating systems, operating systems 101, if you will, the state of today's market. It's certainly one of the oldest markets out there that we track. It used to be operating system was kind of closely connected to the hardware platform that it ran on. Everyone was specific and proprietary, and over time they've opened up. Over time, it's become certainly a much more dynamic market than it had been in the past. Especially over the last couple of years, just with the amount of change and with again AI and cloud movement, the operating systems market has had to evolve accordingly, being able to meet those needs. Kind of general fact, they're the intermediary between the hardware and software that run between them. So without that operating system layer, infrastructure software layer, the applications and workloads aren't going to really be able to function as they should in order to drive that value. They exist everywhere, from the data center core, as they have for decades, into the cloud and increasingly at the edge. There's many different flavors out there. Used to be fully proprietary to open source. And then on the open source side, some vendors, Red Hat included, have taken these open source distributions and put quite a bit of legwork in there and improving them and making sure that they're ready for businesses' needs. So a bit more on the open source operating systems and how customers view the free or community versions versus the commercial fee for use. It's certainly on the open source community side. Has given individual businesses of all shapes and sizes, around the world, a leg up and allowed them to participate in the digital economy. But to some extent, there is a bit of a balancing act there, if you will, with the open source ecosystem. Of course, there's a lot of eyes, a lot of cooks in the kitchen there, which means a lot of changes. They could be wanted or unwanted by those individual businesses. Compared to on the commercial or fee side, these vendors have a lot of it's a clearly defined roadmap in terms of the technologies that they're using, the support they provide. So bit of a balancing act on both ends, and of course I think the it stands to reason that the conversation will go on for years to come. A bit more on the commercial side. What are some of the key benefits, besides the ones I just described? So they could be broken into a couple different categories. First is accessing hardened enterprise-ready software. So these commercial vendors and commercial Linux vendors adopt these open source codes, really enhance them with their own developer teams and other staff members to make sure that they're up and running and ready to go. Both on the performance side, and the second point here is the overall security of the IT environment. So they're ready at the forefront to create updates and patches when there are vulnerabilities, which inevitably are going to happen. And when it comes to security risks, they're also made well aware of these ahead of the general public, so that those updates and patches are ready to go when they're needed. Third, these commercial distributions, they do a great job of making costs more predictable. Of course there is cost there, but what our research finds is with the streamlined performance and higher performance overall, and being able to more densely pack servers with these operating systems, they do perform better. Thanks to the testing, qualification, and certification work, done up front by the vendors themselves. Fourth, and this could easily be one of the most important ones, providing a clear and understandable version lifecycle that help avoid those unwanted surprises and bumps in the community roadmaps. Of course, not all businesses are going to be ready to upgrade to the latest and greatest operating system version the moment it's let out. So what these commercial suppliers really do is they maintain version to version compatibility life cycles. In Red Hat's case, I think it's up to 10 years of support for each individual major release, which really is a nice to have for these businesses out there. And what this all equates to is meeting and exceeding the enterprise SLAs, minimizing downtime, also ensuring great security, great compliance, to avoid any potential problems there. And then on the community side, none of these benefits can be guaranteed. And of course, when it comes to choosing, deploying, and running them, securing them, making sure that they're compliant, it's going to be up to the businesses themselves to be able to do that. Whether it's through self-support of their own teams, or contracted out through some other kind of third party in order to do that. So it's just a bit of a decision to be made there too. As for how we have researched and analyzed the commercial operating systems market, and specifically on Linux, our research finds time and time again, Red Hat really performs well in the marketplace. Red Hat's been a pioneer of commercial open source software for over 30 years now. I think it's 31 with its latest anniversary, with about an 80% share of the commercial Linux market. And here's just kind of a quick snapshot for your viewers out there. Our results last year in 2022, it was RHEL occupied about 78% of the marketplace. But if you were to chart this over time, that performance has really been consistent over time throughout the COVID years and even before that. So definitely a really strong product, as we see in our research too. So why do these organizations choose RHEL for their platform modernization and just operating system choice more generally? A few reasons here. The enterprise grade support, 24/7, 365 for the most, mission and business critical workloads. It's just that, a great explanation here is, it's nice to be able to have that comfort and level support, being able to pick up the phone and call someone, who can help you out. Second is, the always on security with live kernel patching and a trusted software supply chain for the operating system itself. And I'll turn to the right side here, and this could probably bucket in as a sub bullet to any of the other ones. So RHEL comes, standardly with Red Hat Insights, which is an, analytics tool that allows customers to monitor and analyze their environments all through a single interface, to help them track costs, but it also, helps on the security side too, to be able to identify potential risks and vulnerabilities in their overall environments. Turning back to the left side, another nice, benefit that RHEL customers can expect is, it's a consistent performance, whether, on premises, in the cloud, private or public, or at the edge. RHEL is there to meet your workload demands, and consistency across architectures, whether it's, x86 or non-x86 chipsets, including, ARM, IBM Power, Z, Linux One. RHEL's there for you every step of the way. On the version-to-version life cycle, so a stable and predictable version life cycle, 10 years of update and support there. An extensive partner ecosystem across the hardware, software, and services spaces, so Microsoft included, as we'll touch on in a couple minutes. Also dedicated tooling and migration training, whether you're a new or existing customer to Red Hat. And RHEL's just the tip of the iceberg here. Red Hat customers are also going to have access to a broad set of Red Hat products. The other two key pillars there, if you will, are OpenShift and the Red Hat Ansible automation platform, as well as, a variety of different middleware as well. And a special offering now, it's certainly a hot topic in the news that we see for all the CentOS users out there, is a specialized and reduced cost offering to be able to help these users migrate over to RHEL, but it's also for any other third-party Linux distribution as well. So thinking and turning a bit more to the choice of Linux for Microsoft SQL Server as it relates to application modernization. The key business challenge that we're seeing here today is, most digital businesses, they have a lot of different databases and a lot of different places on, different servers, different operating systems, some on-prem, some in the cloud, geographically in different places. And it creates a bit of a headache there when it comes to, being able to identify which data you need and bringing it all together. And a second point here, when you need to be able to, get that data and be able to query it, it's certainly a lot of time spent there, kind of going through all your different, data assets and, getting what you need. And, in many ways, it has to be done in a really manual way, which kind of creates the additional challenge of, potential human error while getting the data that you need. So, when it comes to modernization and standardization, a single platform is really what's needed here to be able to navigate, all that different complexity for all the different data needs that you have. Thinking of a SQL Server product for a long time, it only ran on Windows, which was a bit of a disconnect, with the overall market that has really been and continues to trend toward Linux. But lucky for all the users out there, Microsoft, brought on Linux as, a first-class citizen in order to be able to deploy these SQL Server deployments on Linux to be able to help meet these needs. So beyond Linux, Microsoft and Red Hat have formed a strategic partnership to be able to help these users with their application modernization. And the first two bullets here, in terms of the, benefits that users can expect to enjoy, it's, maybe, it's the same messaging again. So it's a powerful and consistent experience, whether, on bare metal, VMs, containers, on-prem, hybrid, multi-cloud, what have you, it's going to be that same look, feel, experience using RHEL for Microsoft SQL Server as any other workload out there. Again, that future-proof and yet stable release cadence to be able to make sure that your infrastructure is ready to go. Also coming with Red Hat Insights to be able to monitor your SQL Server deployments, running on Red Hat products, and of course a bit of automation tools built into RHEL out of the box. So the Red Hat Enterprise Linux system roles for SQL Server there is also there for customers. That's a bit more on the IT side and the database side, but there's also a lot of benefits there for developers and DevOps teams too. So out of the box, RHEL includes native support for a variety of development tools, frameworks. It's also compatible with containers and microservices for those businesses, kind of really looking to accelerate that cloud native transformation. And a bit more specifically, all RHEL subscriptions come with Podman. While organizations that are a bit farther along in their containerized journeys, can really grow their environments at scale with Red Hat OpenShift, and then automating all of their infrastructure with Red Hat Ansible automation platform. So Microsoft over time has made RHEL its reference architecture for SQL Server. Of course, it's great support between two well-established vendors that are going to be able to bring that enterprise-grade functionality to their users. Everything is developed intentionally and tested up front to make sure that there's that same level of powerful and consistent performance. What it results in is workload optimization. That can maximize the workload performance while also reducing IT costs, being able to more densely run your workloads while still having that same level of performance and security is really going to be a big benefit here. Again, consistency, no matter where you run it or what you want to run it on, the Red Hat Enterprise Linux on SQL Server will, be there as well. SQL Server is also compatible with containers, so it brings that extra agility there for businesses that are ready to to go down that path. Both vendors, have really put security at the forefront of their roadmaps. Just a couple examples here that kind of demonstrate, Red Hat's been certified to the U.S. military for some of their operations, while SQL Server, according to the NIST National Vulnerability Database, has had the fewest vulnerabilities of any other database platform over the last several years. And of course, two great commercial vendors, high levels of service and support across the rest of the board. So I would say that's the crux of the paper there. I just want to leave you with a couple, key points of essential guidance for buyers out there, as you kind of, undergo this application and IT modernization and look to really drive it forward, in the future. So, the first kind of high level point is, for many organizations, they're reluctant to write off those sunken costs and, have to answer, why they want to, totally, redo their infrastructure and be able to capture those investments. I think it's important to really know your organization's strategy and direction top to bottom when it comes to, being able to strategically pick which infrastructure platforms that you want to invest in over time. What comes with that is acknowledging problems with the infrastructure when they do exist. They're not going to go away if you ignore them. That technical debt, if you will, is only going to continue to accrue. So, be able to acknowledge problems when they exist, but also recognize the benefits of optimization and be strategic about, choosing which ones first. Choose the ones that are most mission critical and impactful and will drive the most value first, and then kind of, clean up the edges there as you will over time. And last but not least, plan and execute a plan that's going to work for you today, as well as meet the needs of tomorrow's IT. It may also include working with other strategic partners as part of the process. But overall, more eyes and heads are better than one. So with that, I give a thank you for having me here, Nate, and I'll turn it back to you.
All right, thanks, Greg, for all that background and insight and data. And now we're going to talk a little bit about actual, just Microsoft SQL Server on top of Red Hat solutions, and specifically because I'm the RHEL guy, about RHEL. So let's get into that. All right, so some of us remember a time that's really doesn't feel like it's that long ago, but believe it or not, it's probably a decade or more at this point, where Microsoft and open source weren't really on the same page, right? But that has changed. That changed, like I said, many years ago at this point. This is a quote from Microsoft's CEO, Satya Nadella, where he was affirming not only Microsoft's commitment to open source, but also interoperability with open source platforms. Microsoft came to this realization that we can't have IT competition in a vacuum, as maybe we once did. And working with partners like Microsoft and Red Hat and many others is really the way for sort of the future of IT, right? SQL Server is a great database. RHEL is a great platform. Why don't they work together? Well, they do now. All right, so that's all well and good, but what benefits are there to actually running SQL Server on RHEL? Well, how about reduced costs or less reliance on a single vendor, right? You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. And we've even seen better performance with SQL Server on RHEL over some other platforms. And that's because of cooperation between both Red Hat and Microsoft to enable certain performance tunings within RHEL and some of the upstream projects that contribute to RHEL that really make open source shine, right? We have that level of control over many of the pieces that make up RHEL. And in a survey earlier this year, it was reported that nearly 1/5 of respondents claim that they're running SQL Server on RHEL, or I should say on Linux, and RHEL was over twice as popular as the next named Linux distribution. So again, why should I run SQL Server on RHEL? Well, first, you can expect the same level of support that you would from any other supported workload on RHEL from the Red Hat side and from the Microsoft side. So SQL Server is installed on RHEL in the same way that anything else is, via RPM through your package manager. And it's the same core SQL Server engine that you'll find on other platforms. So you should expect it to behave the same way that SQL Server behaves on, say, Windows or wherever else you might run it. From a security and availability perspective, RHEL is already proven as a great base for a secure application with quick CVE mitigations and tools to help you know what to patch and when to patch it and what the severity level of those patches are, or I should say vulnerabilities are. And you can also leverage RHEL's high availability tools to create a fault-tolerant and resilient deployment. SQL Server performs well on RHEL, and RHEL includes a simplified tuning and deployment roles with the RHEL system roles that Greg talked about earlier. Red Hat Insights can even integrate with SQL Server deployments on top of RHEL and let you know about issues before they happen. For things like, well, I don't know, maybe you've missed a SQL Server backup. It can notify that, or it can notice that and let you know. Some of the best practices that come from Microsoft about how to tune your RHEL system for SQL Server also included in our Insights rule sets. And back to, again, one of Greg's points from earlier, whether you're on premises or in the cloud, there's lots of ways that you can deploy SQL Server on RHEL. Azure and AWS have pre-built images in their marketplaces. You can deploy yourself using Bring Your Own Subscription, virtual or physical, on-premises, AWS Outpost, Azure Stack, VMware, even in a container. Anywhere that RHEL is supported, you can run SQL Server on it. And basically, the value there is RHEL runs like RHEL wherever you run RHEL. It acts the same. The tools that you expect to use to manage it are the same. The performance is just as robust and stable. It all depends on how you want to deploy it based on your business needs and use cases. All right, so that's all well and good, but how about other customers that are also running SQL Server on RHEL? Well, this is a testimonial from XM, which is an energy company in Latin America. They chose to run SQL Server on RHEL. They were challenged to manage new market trends such as renewable energy and distributed generation, as well as related marketing management with tasks like demand generation and market integration. They chose to adopt a new reference architecture that included Microsoft SQL Server on RHEL, supported by Red Hat's application and integration solutions. They chose Red Hat because they wanted a proven and cost-effective operating system with a transparent roadmap and experienced support. They chose us based on use case studies in the energy sector that supported those claims. And as a result, they achieved 3 times faster transaction response, reduced resource use by about 30%, and reduced administrator support and maintenance time by about 60%. And one last thing I wanted to leave you with today is a recent new offering that we have made available, the Red Hat Enterprise Linux for Microsoft SQL Server promotion. It's a limited time offer designed to help IT organizations either that are currently running SQL Server on other operating systems, including CentOS Linux and other Linux distributions, even Windows, to make the move to Red Hat Enterprise Linux. To qualify for this offer, organizations need to have an existing SQL Server subscription running on a non-Red Hat operating system, and customers with new SQL Server workloads will also qualify for the offer. The offering is competitively priced and includes tooling that simplifies the configuration and management of SQL Server workloads, including support integration with Active Directory and advanced features such as always-on availability groups. For users coming from CentOS Linux 7, it also includes support for in-place upgrade, or in-place migration, I should say, or conversion from Red Hat to Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7. For organizations that need a bit more time before they move to the latest version of Microsoft and Red Hat's offerings. If your organization is utilizing Microsoft SQL Server Developer, we recommend that you look at the Red Hat Developer subscription for Teams. This is a no-cost subscription that enables qualifying organizations to build and test applications on the same innovative, reliable platform used for production workloads. To take advantage of this offer, you'd want to contact your Red Hat sales rep.
All right, Nate, we're back, and there's a lot to cover. And truth of the matter is as we were kind of casting about talking to folks about this particular issue, one of the questions we had was from someone who says basically they're straight up nervous because they're on CentOS and didn't plan to do anything, which I don't think is a strategy that is going to scale. So can you talk us through a little bit about what options they might have at this point?
So I can say that they're not alone in being nervous. There's a lot of folks who put a lot of eggs in the CentOS basket. And if you're not aware, June 30th is the end of life. That is end of updates for CentOS Linux 7, which is the currently only release of CentOS Linux, which should be in production, right? CentOS Linux 8 went away before 7. I know that's a weird setup, but that's kind of how it panned out. So if you're still on 7, I just want you to know you have some options to get off of 7. Now, today's webinar was mostly about SQL Server, so these are all framed in the SQL Server mindset. There are more options for folks that maybe aren't depending on running that SQL Server option. So we have more information on that. You'd want to contact your Red Hat sales rep if you've already got a relationship with us. But as far as the SQL Server context, the first option, and this isn't really recommended, but it is an option, you could essentially do nothing. And what's going to happen there is when the end of life for CentOS Linux comes, you'll no longer get OS support. You'll no longer, I shouldn't say support, you'll no longer get OS updates for CentOS itself, which is a bad place to be, especially if you're in a space that really depends on those compliance standards and whatnot. Because as vulnerabilities come in, you're not going to get patches for them anymore, which is kind of a big deal.
I want to double click on that because that is a big deal.
Yes.
While things won't stop necessarily working,
right.
You may not realize the vulnerabilities that are emerging underneath everything seeming as if it's continuing on.
Right. Right. Nothing will stop CentOS Linux 7 from functioning, but the next time there's a major vulnerability that impacts CentOS Linux 7, you won't get an update for it. And that's a big deal. I mean, for anyone who has really any system running, that's a big deal. I don't care if it's in your basement or running your enterprise. That's a big deal.
What other options do we get?
So as I was saying, you will still get limited support from Microsoft for the SQL Server side, but the operating system beneath it, you're not getting updates anymore. Not a good place to be. So the next option would be that you can migrate to any available supported platform that Microsoft supports for SQL Server, right? Obviously, at that point, you'd have to choose what platform that is. You'd have to plan a migration. And there's not like migration assistance from anybody, maybe from Microsoft support from an issue response standpoint, but that's about it, right? A third option would be that you can side by side migrate to RHEL 8 or RHEL 9, right? And this is actually one of the recommendations from Microsoft. With RHEL 8 and RHEL 9, there's actually improvements in the performance of SQL Server running on top of RHEL. So it's not just that you get to a supported operating system, but you also get performance improvements that come within the Linux kernel that don't exist in RHEL 7, but do exist in RHEL 8 and RHEL 9, right? So you actually get performance improvements simply by moving to the newer platform. The only caveat there is that you'll also have to do the incremental updates to SQL Server 2022, because that's what's supported on those platforms. There are options where you can migrate to RHEL 7 as well, but a thing you're going to want to be aware of there is the end of maintenance for RHEL 7 coincides with that end of life for CentOS Linux 7, right? But for that, being on RHEL, we have a thing called the Extended Lifecycle Support add-on. So if you absolutely want to change as little as possible, you can move to a RHEL 7 system, buy that Extended Lifecycle Support, and then that'll buy you an extra 2 or 4 years, depending on which package you go with, to then figure out what your next step is, which could be RHEL 8 or 9.
Yeah, and these are decisions that you should put some effort into because, truth of the matter is that they're, in some cases, it's kicking the can down the road. It's not necessarily a perpetual solution because, RHEL 8 is going to receive support until May 31st, 2029. So you need to think, what is the next? It may not be incremental, I guess, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
it may be worth taking kind of a quantum leap over.
A lot of IT decisions are all about timetables. They're all about what resources can I commit to this right now to get me out of the fire, and then what resources can I commit later to really come up with a great solution, or can I afford to commit the resources now to fix this for the next decade? Right, which is really what you could get into if you get to the latest releases of RHEL 9. RHEL 9 doesn't have a decade left in its life cycle, but its whole life cycle is 10 years, right? We're at about the 5-year mark. No, 3-year mark on RHEL 9. Sorry about that. We're at the 5-year mark on RHEL 8. So you still have a whole bunch of roadway with RHEL 9. With RHEL 8, even though it's at the 5-year mark now, at the end of that 5 years, there's going to be another similar extended lifecycle support option, right? So you could get up to maybe 7 years, or if we still have the 4-year option when that comes, you could get up to 9 years, right? So it's quite the runway.
Well, so I'm curious, because you've been on the client side. I mean, how would you think about this? Let's take the red hat off for a second and just think about it as a client. What would you be thinking about in terms of making that decision?
So it would really come down to what kind of resources I have at my disposal. Is it just me? Am I on a very small team? In which case, the easiest option might be to simply move to a RHEL 7 system, get the same SQL Server engine running on it that I'm used to, and then migrate my workload over to it, and then plan a larger migration in the future. Because let's face it, that June 30th ain't that far away, right?
Right.
If I'm a small team, I might want to just do the simplest thing and buy myself some time. If I have the resource to throw at it, though, I think I would much rather get at a minimum to RHEL 8. And because there's some use cases where maybe RHEL 9 isn't supported in my environment yet. But if it is, that's where I'm going. I'm going to try to get as to the newest release as I can, because SQL Server itself is already certified on both RHEL 8 and 9.
So I think you've effectively answered this question, which is, I'm a current RHEL customer with CentOS. Am I eligible for the promotion that was mentioned earlier?
So we've touched on parts of it. The promotion that we mentioned, just to refresh everybody's memory, was that there's a special offer currently for CentOS users that want to move to RHEL specifically for SQL Server workloads. That particular promotion is not available for folks that are already RHEL customers. So sorry. But there is another offer called the RHEL for third-party Linux migration, which is another special program that's for maybe folks that are already RHEL customers that want to move from CentOS to RHEL. And that includes the extended lifecycle support that I was just talking about. Because like I said, simply moving from CentOS to RHEL doesn't buy you a whole lot if you don't have that extended lifecycle. And then there's discounts involved with that as well, because we know that folks that were on CentOS are used to having a very low bill for their operating system, and now they're moving to a subscription model. And sometimes that's kind of hard to swallow. So there's some discounts in place there to try to help make that a little easier for you.
Yeah, so another question that we've got was with regard to having a hybrid environment, and will this promotion be available for on-prem customers?
So really, this is the beauty of RHEL, and it's one of the things that I talk about most frequently when I talk to anyone who's got an environment that spans both on-premises and cloud providers, is that RHEL runs anywhere. And most of our programs, unless they're cloud provider specific, which there are a few, most of our programs will work wherever, right? And when I say programs, I mean like buying programs and subscriptions and whatnot. If it runs on RHEL, it'll run in a cloud provider, it'll run in your data center, it'll run, in your basement home lab, wherever it is that you need it. So yes, it's available for hybrid environments. It's the long way to say yes.
Well, so I think we've covered kind of the nuts and the bolts, but I can't help but ask about Red Hat Enterprise Linux AI and kind of where are we headed with everything that's happening right now, because I think a lot of folks are wondering not only about immediate decisions like this, but long-term planning with regard to what's coming down the pipe with regard to artificial intelligence.
So there's two major things that we announced at Summit, which happened just back at the beginning of May. First is RHEL AI, which is exactly what you asked about, but the other is RHEL Lightspeed, which is AI driven. And there's a lot of confusion around, because the two announcements happen so close to each other, what's what and which is useful where. RHEL AI is a platform that's based on RHEL that will let you run your AI workloads. We talked about Instruct Lab at Summit, which is a training model, or I should say a tool for training models that runs on top of RHEL AI. That's kind of the stack that RHEL AI is. RHEL Lightspeed, on the other hand, was an announcement we made, which isn't developed yet, but it's in the same vein as our other quote unquote Lightspeed assistance models, right? Which are AI backed, not quite a chatbot, but it's meant to help you administer our applications, right? So there's Ansible Lightspeed that exists today, which will help you write Ansible playbooks based on, a model that backs that. RHEL Lightspeed is intended to be like, hey, I need to perform these tasks on RHEL. Can you help me out? And it gives you suggestions on how to get these things done. So those are kind of the two things in that space that we're currently talking about.
Yeah, so I mean, as you look out the rest of the year, in terms of obviously these immediate problems, but all the other things that Red Hat is kind of bringing to the party and investing in and supporting customers with. What are some of the things that are getting you excited?
To be honest, aside from the AI stuff that we just covered, we have a new feature that's in tech preview called RHEL image mode, which is another way to deploy RHEL. I mean, I'm the RHEL guy, right? You're asking the RHEL guy what he's excited about. There's probably a bunch of other things at Red Hat that are really cool. But image mode is cool for me. The old sysadmin in me is really excited about this because it's a new way to not just deploy RHEL, but define how you want that deployment to look, right? And it takes a lot of the methodologies that we've learned in the containerization of application space, and it applies it to how we want to actually make an image to deploy to either bare metal or virtual systems or even cloud systems. That's just, take that container and make it a server, make it a machine, right? And it's really interesting. It's in the RHEL 9.4 release as a tech preview, so you can go tinker with it today. It's still very new technology, so there's still some rough edges there. That's why it's tech preview. But it's moving really quickly, and we're hoping that this is kind of the future for how to deploy systems.
Yeah, thanks for that. It's an amazing time, and again, I know we're all fighting fires that kind of are immediate and need fighting. But the way the world is going to unfurl over the next 5 to 10 years, I think is anybody's guess. But you're going to be right in the middle of it, which I think is going to be a very cool spot to be.
Who would have thought that after, I don't know, the 20-something years, 30-something years that Linux has been around, that we'd still be excited about innovations that are happening on the platform, not just the things that happen on top of it. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, the penguin's going to live forever.
I hope so.
All right. This was great, Nate. Thanks for all the advice and updates and solid information. And best of luck as you're helping folks get through what's happening immediately, but also best of luck for the rest of the year with everything that you're doing at Red Hat.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, there you have it. Another solution in our spotlight. We want to thank Red Hat and IDC for that presentation, and we appreciate your attendance as well. Until next time, I'm Doug Atkinson here at Solutions Review. Thanks for watching.
If your business would like to be featured in a future event, contact us today.